and welcome to the channel. This is the place where we explore what life was like for William Shakespeare in turn of the 17th century England. This week, we're exploring news and the flow of information from place to place about how current events from countries like Scotland were reported on and known about in places like England, which was a separate country at this time. Let's find out right now on That Shakespeare Life. When major events happen around the world, people in England found out about these events going on through a variety of different channels. However, 17th century England was obviously pre-newspaper era, and they didn't have channels like CNN or other international broadcasting news into their homes on a daily basis. So when it came to the spread of information and reporting on major events, how did people like Elizabeth I keep tabs on the international goings-on around the world? For that matter, how did the average person like William Shakespeare know about major events like Moray's assassination or the coronation of James I? How were these things talked about back in England? To find out these details about the flow of information and exactly how news was reported on during Shakespeare's lifetime, I sat down with Amy Blakeway, senior lecturer in Scottish history at the University of St. Andrews, to find out more about how news traveled between countries like Scotland and England during Shakespeare's lifetime. Here's what she had to say. What were the ways that Scottish news was published in England? Was it always printed works like this pamphlet, or was there oral transmission sometimes relied upon for reporting events? And how exactly were they sending the information?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, Cassidy. It's a very complex news economy, as it were. The oral information you've alluded to is perhaps where to start, because this is the thing we think about most instinctively in the pre-modern world. Rumors and connections and personal networks are absolutely key. The English have agents all over Scotland. They have them in the Scottish court. They've got at various points there are people who are more like spies. At various points there are official diplomats. At various points there are just Scots who are politically and religiously aligned with English aims and will send materials home. There's also more informal news stuff. All those connections I mentioned on the border. Those women who are going to the market in Berwick-upon-Tweed are carrying news with them, and they'll set rumours off, and occasionally English officials will sort of haul them in. And you've also obviously got printed books, which, as you've said, are crossing the border. But what I think is maybe more important, importance is different, but in terms of more frequent, more regular, more bedded down into the information economy, the transmission of manuscripts. Things written by hand. Now, we tend to think maybe from a modern perspective, there's an assumption a manuscript is somehow private. That's something we really need to put away when we're thinking about the 16th century. Letters are very often designed to be shown and read by multiple people, and you'll often see this in the addresses, or you say explicit instructions to show this to somebody, or alternatively explicit instructions, don't show this and burn it. So correspondence and the networks through which that flows is really key. But also manuscript pamphlets cross the border fairly regularly. And these have got an advantage to print because they're quicker to produce. That you can't get the mass number of copies, but the amount of time it takes to set up a press, actually, if you just want a dozen copies to go to the key people, manuscript can be quicker, can be more effective, and can be cheaper as well. So there's manuscripts crossing the border also. And all these things kind of relate to each other. You've got the unofficial rumour, you've got the official diplomatic report, you've got the manuscript pamphlets, you've got then occasionally these printed publications, but they're all perhaps going through similar types of networks there.
In addition to a huge network of spies and the regular publication of news pamphlets to be relied upon for this flow of information, King James was regularly in correspondence via a series of letters to Elizabeth I, and he was writing letters with Elizabeth from the time he was quite young, so he did this almost his whole life. They were even so chummy, at least by letter, that Elizabeth I successfully had Leicester's Commonwealth, a publication that disparaged the Queen, banned in Scotland by King James. If you'd like to learn more about that history, as well as more on the news and the power of letters and the flow of information from Shakespeare's lifetime, you can check out our entire interview with Amy Blakeway on our podcast episode at CassidyCash.com/episode 301. That's CassidyCash.com/EP301. Now, while you're there, if you'd like to see more visual history about these letters, including primary documents and more archival information related to Scotland and the letters between Elizabeth and James, as well as the history of news and the flow of information, make sure to sign up to be a patron at cassidycash.com/episode 301. When you hit the Become a Patron button, all of these extras will automatically expand right there on the page. That's it for this week. Thank you for watching. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.